Hello, it's Alpha here, and today we are back on the Pioneer server. So Lorsan was released today on the Pioneer server, or we were able to do some testing with him today on the Pioneer server. So first I'm gonna go through his skills, and then I'm gonna show a couple of the fights that I did with him and some potential teams for him. But let's quickly start with his skills. So, like every hero, he has 3 skills, and then 2 of those skills are then amplified by his Mythic Plus and Supreme Plus effects that we can see right here. So if we start with his ultimate, he summons a storm at the frontmost enemy, and the storm will last for 5 seconds, and it has 2 tile range, so it's an AoE storm around the enemy hero, and it will do haste reduction on all of the enemies, and it will do damage every 0.5 seconds. The total damage is somewhere around like 700, I think, so it's actually quite high damage for his ultimate. Then he has his chain ability, which is kind of his main ability, this one here. I don't have the name of the skills because I don't think it's important, but let's talk about his second ability. So when the battle starts, Lorsan will create a link or chain between the nearest and the furthest enemy, and then any damage that those enemies take is transferred to the other enemy. So if you damage one of them, the other one will also take damage. And then the chain will break when the total damage on both of the enemies reaches 900% of Lorsan's initial attack. So at some point when you deal enough damage, the chain will break. And then, if you have the Mythic Plus ability unlocked, when the chain breaks, Lorsan will heal all allies, like instantly. And then Lorsan will create a new chain between enemies. And then, if you have the weapon upgraded to plus 10, then he will also stun both of the enemies that were chained when the chain breaks. And then the stun duration is really long, actually. It's 5 seconds of stun, so he stuns 2 enemies for 5 seconds when the chain breaks. So if you don't have the Mythic Plus ability, obviously he can only cast 1 chain, so this you really need the Mythic Plus ability for him to kind of work. And also, just getting the plus 10 weapon is also probably like quite important because that's his stun ability. So then his final ability is buff plus heal on the weakest ally. So after 3 seconds when the battle starts, he will cast the healing first time, and it has 12-second cooldown, so quite a long cooldown for the heals, and it's a single target, healing the weakest ally. It grants 50 dodge, 30 haste, and healing per second, and the buff lasts for 6 seconds. So for the 6-second duration, he will do some healing on that ally, and the ally will get the haste and the dodge. And dodge means that the ally has a chance to dodge normal attacks. So I don't know, I'm not sure that there has been any dodge abilities before this. But I'm not also super sure whether it's that useful skill, but yeah, it remains to be seen, I guess. And then if you have the Supreme Plus, while this buff is active, the buff target is also immune to all crowd control effects. So that's kind of nice ability, I guess. So basically what he does, he has ultimate that deals damage and reduces enemy haste. He has the chain that connects the nearest and the furthest enemy, and then when the chain breaks, the enemies will be stunned, and allies will be healed. And then he has a healing ability with some haste and dodge buffs, and immune to crowd control effects. And Lorsan is a wilder support hero with magic damage and range of 5. Okay, so then let's talk about his viability on Dream Realm. Now, based on this small test, we can see that he doesn't seem to be very viable for Dream Realm at all. Like, if you look at the healing numbers, they are a lot less than someone like Smokey are able to do. And his damage numbers are not very high. It's similar to like Coco's damage. So he doesn't really seem to have a lot of viability on Dream Realm. And that is partially because he can't use like half of his kit. So if I'm not completely mistaken, he cannot use the chain ability on single target. So obviously with bosses there is usually only one target. So he can't use his second ability at all against bosses. So then the only thing that he can do is use his ultimate, but it's like not very effective. It just deals damage. And then he can use his healing, but it's a single target healing sometimes that gives like haste, so it's not good enough for bosses in my opinion. So probably you won't be seeing him on any boss content. So yeah, then we can go into PvP, but like before we go into PvP, we can talk about his skills a bit more in detail. So the first thing that's a little bit maybe confusing when you first try to use him is how does the chain targeting actually work. So this symbol here will show you which heroes he is going to be targeting when the battle starts. But then you can change the heroes based on his position, because it says that it will target the nearest and farthest enemy. So if you look at this line, obviously this is going to be the nearest enemy. But then if you place him here, then Tamesia is going to be the nearest enemy. And then the farthest enemy is just, in this case, Damien, and in this case, the longest distance is to Rowan. But what if two heroes are on same distance? So then the targeting goes in this way. You can see that from this position, both of the front heroes are from same distance from Lorsan, so it seems that he will then, in this situation, he will target the leftmost hero. But then on the back side, you can see that both of these back heroes are same distance from Lorsan, so then he will target the right side on the back. So yeah, it can be a little bit confusing to try to figure out how it goes, but yeah, this is what it seems to be. And also it's good to note that even though at the start of the battle, in this situation, it's showing that it's going to be targeting Damien, but because Damien leaves the battlefield when the battle starts, the targeting will actually change. So then the next farthest target is Rowan instead. So you can see that once the battle actually starts, we can see that there is a link between Tamesia and Rowan, because Damien left the battlefield. So one thing that can be sometimes relevant information, I guess, is that the chain seems to stay even if Lorsan dies. And then if the chain is broken, the enemies are still stunned even if Lorsan is not there anymore. I'm not 100% sure if the healing also happens when the chain breaks, but I would assume so. But yeah, I wasn't really able to test that, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that the enemies were stunned even when the Lorsan was dead and the chain was broken. So then it's also a little bit unclear as to how heroes like Tasi, Lilimei and Thoran interact with the chain, because once they go into like the untargetable state, so for example Lilimei has the when she's doing like the interruption, she's in the invincible state, and when she's doing the bullet ballet or whatever the skill is called, she's also in the invincible state. And when Tasi loses enough health, she will go into like the recovery state, and while she's there, she's invincible. So I'm pretty sure that once that happens, the chain is not active while that's kind of happening. Like obviously you can't do damage to them, so the chain is not gonna do any damage while that's happening. So against heroes like Lily May and Tasi, the chain is maybe not as effective. So for example, if Tasi is the frontmost target, it's not very good for you necessarily, because once she takes enough damage, she will go into recovery state, and then for like 3 seconds the chain break is delayed. And also your heroes will switch target once Tasi goes into recovery state, so then they won't be hitting Tasi anymore. So you're kind of delaying the chain break even further. So I have one clip of this happening. So when the Tasi is like at the front, and then the chain is not, I think, even broken once during this whole fight. Also, one thing, if you were like thinking, is Lorsan gonna be good with Bonnie? Like, can you trigger the aging debuff with the Lorsan Link? Like, the idea is that Bonnie will debuff the backmost target, and Lorsan will also create link between the front target and the back target. And then if you deal damage to the front target, the back target will take damage. And does it count for the aging debuff? But it doesn't seem to work that way, which is a little bit strange. I would imagine that it should work that way, but based on my testing, I wasn't able to like trigger the aging debuff by attacking the chained other target. But when you look at the damage numbers after a battle, you can clearly see that Lorsan is the one who is like dealing the damage when someone is damaging the chain. So I don't know why it doesn't trigger the Bonnie's effect, but at least that seems to be the case. But yeah. So couple notes about the healing spell. There isn't anything too special about the healing spell, but just some things that came to my mind is that it is a single target heal and it has quite long cooldown. So even though it is a high amount of healing that it provides you, it only provides it to one hero every now and then, so he's not really necessarily that great at supporting the team. If you are able to break the chain, every time you break the chain, it will heal all of the team. So then you can actually do quite a lot of healing. But if you are not able to break the chain, then this healing is probably not enough to keep your team alive. So you might need another healer on your team, or then you might be running some kind of burst team, which doesn't really care about healing that much. The dodge buff that it gives you is kind of... I'm not sure how effective the dodge buff is. It doesn't seem very good to me, because a lot of the teams that people are using right now don't really care about like auto attacks, because as far as I understand, the dodge only applies to auto attacks. So most of the teams are like magic based teams like Tasi and Bonnie and whatever Taylene, so it doesn't really give you any protection against those teams. It's also like, if you look at the Supreme Plus effect of this buff, it gives the target unaffected, so they are not affected by crowd control effects, which sounds nice, but it doesn't happen at the start of the battle. So the first healing only happens 3 seconds after the start of the battle, so you can't use this healing to protect against something like Aeron Burst comp. And also, because it's a single target and it also only heals like the weakest ally, then you can't really plan that well that, okay, you want this specific hero to get crowd control protection, because usually it's not gonna be that hero who gets it. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. But the ultimate, like I said, it does deal quite a lot of damage, but Lorsan starts with 0 energy, so it takes quite a long time for him to do the ultimate. And also because the ultimate targets frontmost hero, sometimes the ultimate doesn't seem very effective, because if the frontmost ally is like just a tank and it only hits that one, then it's not as good. But sometimes it can be very good if all of the enemies are grouped up, because it's an AoE ultimate with a lot of damage. So when I was trying to think what kind of teams I would want to use Lorsan in, I was kind of struggling to come up with some ideas. Now obviously the first thing, once again, that comes to mind is Aeron Burst team. But the thing is that that team is already, like, even without Lorsan, that team is really good. It does its job. It will, like, burst enemy teams. So I'm not sure, like, why you would want Lorsan for the burst team specifically, because it's already doing its job. And the team doesn't really have that many, like, open spots, because if you're using the burst team and the enemy is using Lily May, then you always have to run Aeron, you have to run Brian, and you are gonna run Olmus. Like, that's the core of the burst team. And then you're running, I guess, Carolina, and then you would be replacing Bonnie or Arden with Lorsan. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. Like, it's probably gonna be as good as Arden, for example, but then, like, why would you need him then? But I guess in theory, it's not the worst thing. He does provide some sustain for the teams, so sometimes what happens with burst teams that you are able to kill everyone else except, for example, like Tassi, then maybe he's able to keep your team alive against Tassi, although I doubt it. But it is possible that he then provides you with some extra healing once you have burst down most of the team. So maybe he's good for that reason, or like better option than some other, DPS that you already have. One option, I guess, would be to remove Ulmus from the team, so you would run something like this instead, and hope that kind of he might provide some stuns for the team instead of like the Ulmus roots. So yeah, it's definitely possible that something like these teams could work. But the thing about the Aeron Burst team just in general is that you only use him for burst teams usually for attacking. You can't really use burst team on your defense. So I don't know if you really need another like attack team. Like, defense teams is kind of the thing that you really hope to get heroes for. But yeah, I don't know. I did do some tests with this kind of burst team against some just like random teams on the Pioneer server, and yeah, you were able to win some of the fights, and you can see that Lorsan is able to do quite a lot of damage, because the chain just like amplifies the damage that someone like your Carolina does to the heroes. And then he also does some healing, but the healing is kind of wasted because you're already killing the enemy team, so there is nothing left for him to really heal. And yeah, this is also kind of like a similar situation, although the damage is not as impressive this time. But yeah, it's definitely possible to use him on these kind of teams. I'm gonna show just a couple replays. And yeah, I also did some AFK stage testing with kind of like a similar team, where you would normally run something like Arden instead of him in this team, or you would run I don't know, Tamesia or something. So yes, this team is definitely able to do it, but at the same time, Arden is also able to do similar damage. If you look at this example here, and then on a couple of the stages where I was not able to clear the stage with Lorsan as part of the team, but I was able to clear the team with Arden as part of the team. So it's like, is he really even better than Arden for this purpose? On one of the stages, I couldn't do it with Bonnie, but then when I switched Bonnie into Lorsan, then I was able to do it. So, you know, maybe in some situation he's better than the other options. So one thing that I kind of mentioned earlier is that he is not really good at healing if you can't break the chain. And so if you're trying to kind of run some like not burst teams with him, then it can lead into a situation where he doesn't actually do any healing. Like here you can see that in these fights he didn't actually do any healing. Now, yes, Haven also didn't do much, but Damien did, for example, here a lot more. So he's also quite squishy. So especially if you're fighting against like Bonnie, Tassi, Tailin teams, and you're not running a burst team, then he can, and he is like the backmost hero, then he will just die in a second. So yeah, these were not very like good examples of his ability. And maybe I can show one of these fights. So then I also tried him with kind of like with the idea that he is supported by Ludovic, so hopefully Ludovic is able to heal, like keep both of them alive, and then he does some healing here and there, but he also does some damage with the help of like heroes like Tassi and Linmei. And with this team I was able to win like some of these Bonnie teams, for example. So here you can see that I did like the same fight twice and I was able to win. Now one thing to note is that these fights were done in the duel mode, so it could be a little bit different from like the actual arena, but I mean we can see that both players had like a same level of talents and not that many charms. Like we can see that the opponent has 3 charms and I had only 2 charms. Or, well, I actually had only 1 charm, so maybe I had even a bit weaker team. So you were able to win some of these Bonnie teams with with this kind of Lorsan team, and I did some fights against some other teams as well. Now here you can see that I had some advantage from the talents against my opponents, but you know, still able to win them. But with this team I also lost against like similar teams with different placements, so it's not like this team is gonna like win all of the times. And one thing to also note is that even though I was able to win some of these fights, for example against this one where I lost, I then just used like the burst team instead, and I was able to win with the burst team. And I also did the burst team without Lorsan and with Arden, and I was able to win with that team as well. So it's not like Lorsan was kind of like needed for the win. So yeah, I don't really know what to think about him. I'm not 100% sure that he's very like needed for your team, but of course this is based on very limited one-day testing with only like couple fights on the actual normal arena. So it is very possible that maybe there is like a better team for him. So if you have some ideas for team, then please leave a comment so I can test those teams tomorrow, for example. And then yeah, he seems to be like decent on the burst team. So if you want to like have more options for your burst team, then maybe he's your guy. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!